Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Mothman Podcast. Tonight, we're going to discuss a individual's sighting of a paranormal episode, and we're going to call this a warning from the grave. Good evening, Amanda.
How you doing?
Amanda, you want to take this episode and run with it for us?
Yeah. Before I get started with that, I just want to tell you guys that this story is anonymous, and I know a lot of people don't always want to be identified with a paranormal experience. So if you have a paranormal experience that you want to share, you can stay anonymous, send it to mothmanpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you are interested in being interviewed by us, we would love to interview you and hear your story. And
we also have the ability to do a phone interview with you over the podcast. So if you'd like to call in, you can give your name or not and talk to us about your encounter or whatever's come about in the paranormal world in your life. So be happy just to call in and talk to us. We would love to hear from you.
We definitely want to hear from our listeners. So this story comes to us from a listener, and this person does not want to be identified on the podcast. They work for a large company as a sales rep, and they kind of are scared they'll lose their credibility if their identity was to be known. Daryl met with this individual at a restaurant, and they told him their story, and we said that we would share it but keep them completely anonymous. So hang on to your hats. Here we go with a paranormal story. The salesperson stated that they had been to a trade show in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and they left the show really late one evening, traveling toward Cherokee, North Carolina, on a small back road called Highway 19. And this road was extremely curvy. So for the rest of the story, I'm just going to read the story in the first person as they told it to us. And you can make your own conclusions about what you think and what you think this person saw. This person says, I'd been traveling for about 30 minutes, and it came up a thunderstorm with heavy rain and wind. I could barely see the road in front of me. Just as quick as the storm came up, it passed and left the road wet, and my windshield started to fog up due to the difference in temperature on the outside and inside of my car. This was causing me to have a hard time seeing out of the windshield. While I was driving and constantly trying to clear the windshield, I saw what appeared to be a small figure waving their arms, indicating that they wanted me to stop the car. As I approached closer, I slowed, and I saw a small young girl in the highway in front of me, motioning for me to stop. When I stopped, the young girl had a pretty red and white dotted dress, and she walked to my window and told me I needed to turn my car around. There had been a rock slide in a blind curve blocking the highway just ahead of me. I thanked the little girl, and I asked if I could give her a ride home. She looked toward a house and pointed toward it, that it was just off the highway. I thanked the little girl again, and I turned around, drove back to Maggie Valley, and I spent the night at a local hotel. I told the clerk what had happened, and he stated that the local sheriff's department had notified about the danger on the highway. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, I realized that this little girl probably saved my life. So I decided to give her a little gift, and on the way out of town, I stopped and made a purchase. I drove back to the house that the little girl motioned to. Upon arriving, I knocked on the door, and a lady came to the door. I asked if I could speak to the little girl, and she said, "What little girl?" I explained what had happened, and she asked me what the little girl looked like. I told her and described the red and white dotted dress, and then I noticed that the lady started to tear up. She said, "Oh, that's my Ellen. She comes around every once in a while when there's a problem on the highway." This puzzled me. I said, I don't understand. The lady said, her voice trembling, that was my daughter. She was run over on the highway and she died 6 years ago. I couldn't speak. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. The lady's eyes teared up, and I turned and I walked down the steps, returning to my car in a very numb state. To this day, I can't drive down that highway, but I know in my heart that if I did, I'll be safe because there's someone looking after those who travel Highway 19. So we want to thank this salesperson for sharing their story with us. I'm sure there's going to be people who roll their eyes at the story. I'm sure there's going to be people who believe the story. These are things that we cannot explain, and these are things that when they happen to us, it's a paranormal experience. If you have a story which you would like to share with us, we can meet with you. You can call in. You can email us, and we would absolutely love to have you guys on the show. Please contact us at mothmanpodcast@gmail.com.
And Amanda, this is what this whole program's all about. Bringing stories, whether they're, you believe it or you don't believe it. It's about bringing the paranormal stories to life.
And like you always say, all we can do is present the evidence.
And that's correct. And here again, this is a great story, and it keeps us all thinking, what's really going on out there? And that's our job, to investigate and try to bring the facts to you. So again, thank you for listening to Mothman Podcast, and we hope that you will listen to our next podcast, which is going to be coming up shortly, and it's going to be what the audience has asked for, and they wanted us to do a podcast on UFOs. So, Amanda, I believe you've done some research, and I've done some research, and I think we're going to have one of our other investigators into the studio with his findings during this episode. So we hope you enjoy the next episode. But again, thank you for listening to us, and until next time, from Daryl
and Amanda,
good evening.
Thank you.